Clean Energy Week. This is Honam, the project producer of Leader Associates and your host of today. I'm so glad to see you all in this live stream again in this afternoon session and the final session of Clean Energy Week. For the attendees who made the morning session, please kindly find the view video button on the conference schedule to make up this inspiring content. As for speakers' presentation slides, we'll share the one that is not confidential and approve of our speakers to attendees with advanced tickets within next week, along with the link of the whole conference recording. Before getting started, I would like to remind you of the few housekeeping matters in short. Firstly, who we are. We Leader Associates is a global leading event organizer concentrating on renewable energy. In the past 5 years, we host more than 50 events across the Asia-Pacific region, South America, Africa, and Europe. Secondly, please kindly find the afternoon session agenda on this slide. In the afternoon, we'll focus on the supply chain, financing, and advanced solution go with interesting panel discussion and informative keynote speech. Thirdly, I'd like to briefly introduce our one-on-one meeting match function. This exclusive one-on-one meeting function facilitates building business connections and partnership by our online chat box. And our user-friendly event matchmaking service is incredibly simple to use as well. Please kindly note that we will keep this platform open until the final day of this event. So please take your time and explore more partnership in this one-on-one meeting platform. Last but not the least, the Q&A box is actually open for all attendees and audience during the whole afternoon session. As you can find, there's a Q&A box on your meeting control panel, and we will select 1 or 2 questions for our speaker to answer after their presentation if time is allowed. Now, without further ado, let's continue our renewable tour to Philippines, where renewable energy is being seen as an irresistible trend. Firstly, I'd like to introduce one of our old friends, Ms. Tiachi from Sun Asia Energy. She will give a speech on the updated milestone and future outlook for floating solar in Philippines. Tiachi provides leadership in the development and application of solar energy in both commercial and residential rooftop and utility-scale solar farm, as well as great location in Philippines. Hi, Tiachi, please start your presentation. Hello, Tiachi. I think you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much and good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference, and I'm happy to be part of it. I congratulate the Leaders Associate for devoting this whole day session in the conference to discuss this emerging and exciting technology in the solar energy space. This conference, this particular session is really sharing of experiences among Asian countries, and such platform can accelerate the development and commercialization of the floating solar. And that is why my session today, as I find it very important. Now, let me just introduce my company. Can you, I'm gonna share my screen now. Sun Asia is a pioneer of solar energy in the Philippines. We were one of those who began our development work as an offshoot of the renewable energy law that happened in the Philippines. And we were organized as early as 2013. And in the last 7 years, we have participated in the development of utility scale solar, rooftop solar, and other solar projects. And our successes are significant in the develop the 3rd largest solar plant in the Philippines. It is a 60 megawatt facility in Cebu. We also are proud of our first of a kind microgrid, which we have established in support of social housing. We are also one of 2 World Bank accredited pay-as-you-go solar provider of solar home kits. And of course, we have the biggest floating solar test bed in Laguna Lake. Let me just start and transition into our topic today. As I said, one of our mission is really to develop utility scale solar, and therefore developing floating solar is one of the key projects that we have in the Philippines today. As you can see, if we go back to this slide, you can almost see that for 7 years, it took a lot of hard work before the floating solar globally has reached the state where it is right now. Every year, the development or the installation were very few until 2016, when the growth of the floating solar really zoomed and jumped and accelerated. So from 55 annually, it increased to 67 and jumped to as high as 453 megawatt in 2017 alone. So that is really how the floating PV solar has developed, and it has been an encouraging growth in this solar energy space. But let us look more at the development of PV, floating PV closely. As you can see, although in 2007, you can look at Japan as being the pioneer in floating solar. In 2013, it was South Korea that constructed solar in its first megawatt size. After that, China has been leading in increasing and commercializing solar, floating solar. So from 2017 to 2018 to 2019, for straight 3 years, the construction of floating solar in China has gone bigger and bigger. And as you can see, from 190 megawatt of China's 2 project, in 2018, it doubled. And again, in 2019, it tripled from its 2017. Now, this trend shows clearly that Asia is the leader in the global movement for floating solar. Asia's new build or construction of floating solar constitute bigger than 90% of the total global installation of floating solar. This trend is clearly going to continue as Southeast Asian countries really have been very bullish. And in their declaration for 2020 alone, you can see Vietnam, South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, Myanmar, and Philippines declaring the number or the capacity of floating solar projects that are in their pipeline and will start construction from 2021 until the next 3 years. So what this table shows is that Asia will really continue to be a major player in the floating PV space. Now, we have a lot to learn from the installation of the floating solar. And if you can look at the different projects that are in Asia right now, you can see that the experiences of how floating solar behaves in collaboration with hydropower plants, as the Vietnam experience shows, as against the open seas that the Singapore experience will bring, including inland waters like water reservoir in the middle of an urban setting, or even in Thailand, an amusement park, and ponds and lakes. All of these different locations bring with them very unique experiences that we can learn from insofar as floating PV is concerned. Now, in the Philippines, the biggest lake, which is the Laguna Lake, is something to really watch, because right now there are pilot projects that have been put up in Laguna Lake, and this lake shows a big potential as the lake size is 91,000 hectares, the lake surface. That size is bigger than Singapore. So really the potential of putting floating solar in that lake in the Philippines offers a lot of opportunity. More importantly, the lake is located very close to the franchise area of the biggest distribution utility company in the Philippines. These utility companies provide 70% of the total electricity requirement of the entire country. And having the lake in their backyard offers solar energy developers a lot of opportunities. However, on the other side of it, the lake also poses challenges. It is a multi-use water resource. It is used for recreation. It is used as a source of domestic water. It is used also for power and also for food. Therefore, there has to be a comprehensive study on how solar energy will coexist and operate within this different multi-use of water. Another challenge is that Laguna Lake is visited by 20 typhoons a year, and therefore it is very unique in the sense that it has strong winds. It is visited by strong winds. So there is a positive side to the Laguna Lake, and there are also some challenges one has to face as it contemplates on using the resource of the biggest lake in the country. Let me just share with you basically, let me just share with you our projects here. This is just a video that you can see. So let me just share with you specifically this floating solar pilot that we have put into the Laguna Lake. It's a 14 kilowatt peak pilot project. It is the biggest pilot project that is located in the lake, and it was originally conceived and implemented not only as a research and development initiative, but also as a social development project that seeks to provide clean energy to the community. So it lights, and you can see at the back of the photo is the village center, and that is providing clean energy. The pilot is providing clean energy to the administration, to the administrative office, and also the recreation center of the village. Also, we have configured the floating solar to have two orientation so that we can capture the irradiation and the experience from the lake. So the red portion that you can see here is south facing. We wanted to validate the literature. We want to know whether indeed there is going to be an increase in irradiation as compared to land-based. The blue portion is east-west orientation. So we have specifically configured this pilot in order to study irradiation, performance, and resiliency of the system. So we also use this orientation or the pilot project to essentially experiment and study how the panels will perform. And we have used two panels in this pilot project. One is double glass, and the other one is just the regular panel. So the point here is to know what will be the performance of solar panel given certain orientation and given certain configuration. This is our mooring and anchoring system. As you can see, there are 6 anchors that support this floating solar. And the anchor that we use is basically screw piled into the lake bed. We thought that this was the best solution and not just put a dead weight because, as I said, the wind in this, the wind of the lake is pretty challenging. So we wanted to install a more secured and a more stable system. The anchors are supported by 10 mooring lines. So this is the screw spiling technology that we have adapted, and we felt that this is very applicable for the conditions of the lake. Now, for the floaters, we have used Achilletere floaters, and they have provided us a particular kind of floater that is more or less adaptable to Philippine situation. Now, what are the challenges? We have been operating the pilot for almost 2 years now. Actually, 18 months. We started in June, and so our year 1 experience was this year, and we're still running the pilot until now in one of the sections of the lake. Now, one of the most important experience for this particular pilot will be the anchoring and mooring. Comparing the land base and the floating solar, except for the mooring and the floaters, all are the same as the land base. We use solar panels, we use inverters, we connect the grid, but the two different components which really makes floating solar different are the anchoring and mooring and the floaters that support the panels of the plant. Now, it is very important in the Philippines that the anchors and mooring are well designed, because these are, just to give you an example, for this year alone, we were already visited by 4 big typhoons, and most of them happened in the last part of this year, starting in May, where we were visited by a typhoon that had a 60 km per hour to 100 km per hour. The biggest the strongest that visited us was very recent, only 2 weeks ago. The wind speed was about 171 to 220, and that is Typhoon Rolly and even Ulysses. You see, Typhoon Rolly was stronger, but it was not a direct hit. It was an indirect hit. That was signal number 4, but we were lucky that it was not a direct hit. The direct hit was really Ulysses, where the wind speed was at 120 and 170. That's why the anchoring is very important. As you can see, this is how the waves behave, and this is regular. This is not a typhoon condition kind of wave, but this is normal wave. So essentially what we're saying is that the anchoring has to be very, very well thought out and well designed. And this is the reason why in this December, we are already installing sensors and monitors that will give us very accurate reading of how the wind, the waves, and the water will behave. Presently, we only use the wind speed that I have shared with you, are wind speed that were taken from the Weather Bureau. So on site, we have not really gotten an exact reading. These are basically data from the Weather Bureau. But we plan to, in fact, this month, we're starting already to install very powerful sensors and monitors to really get a more or a clearer indication of the behavior of the wind and waves. Now, insofar as the floating solar is, the floaters are concerned, Shell Terre has also been learning a lot from this installation. They have acquired very significant lessons on the connectors, how they should be connected, on the anchoring, how to really strengthen the anchors and the mooring lines in the conditions of the Laguna Lake. So essentially, they too are getting some very valuable experience in this. Another important lesson is essentially the security and the stability of the floating solar. This photo shows you how fencing the system is critical. There are times of years, and if you can look at the right side of the slide, you can see the sea of water lily that really dominate the lake. And it is very important to put some physical barriers into the lake, otherwise they will invade the system. And as you can see here, our personnel are removing all of the water hyacinth from this installation. So we use, we're putting physical barriers, and we're also monitoring to make sure that the water hyacinth remain outside the floating solar, and of course, remote sensing. So those are the lessons that we have learned, and we look forward to a closer monitoring of the test bed that we have. And it is important to have a very active information sharing of all of the pilot projects that are in the lake. There are 4 pilots in the lake, around the lake, and they are scattered all over the lake, the water surface of the lake. And so there's got to be some sharing of information on that so that we can enrich and accelerate the commercialization of the floating solar in the lake. Of course, the Laguna Lake Development Authority, that is the government agency that is handling the management of the lake, have already issued a resolution commercializing the pilot, meaning to say the 4 pilot projects can now move into commercialization, and they have already indicated that essentially the lake can now be used for utility scale solar. So we believe that the Laguna Lake, because of its size and because of its importance in the energy, has to be declared as the flagship of national interest. It can power a lot of renewable energy, as the size of the lake can really provide that space for floating solar to flourish. And it can be the platform to deliver the electricity in order to meet the country's increasing demand for clean energy and decrease our reliance for the imported fuel. We believe that as the years progress and as the commercialization of floating solar in the Laguna Lake happens, Laguna Lake will be a capital of the floating solar in Southeast Asia. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Achia. So there are some questions that is raised from our audience in the Q&A box. So I'm wondering, like, is it possible for you to open the Q&A box and choose one or two questions that you're willing to answer?
I think, the first one, which orientation shows better performance? Well, basically, both of them have very good performance, and the literature uh, where there is a 15% increase in irradiation basically shows that that is really something that is validated with our experience. How deep is the lake? The lake is about, on average, 2.5 meters. Um, and also, are there known effects of to the biodiversity in the area? This is a very interesting question because it shows that the fish congregate in under the pilot, the floating solar pilot, which means that they like the condition under the lake, and so it seems that the lake does not pose any threat to the biodiversity of the lake. So the floating solar doesn't disrupt the life of the lake itself. So I think those are the questions that have been raised. There are still some here, but they are just almost the same questions as those that have been already posed.
All right, thank you so much for your answer, Tiyoshi. And I think if you're willing to answer the rest of the question in the Q&A box, you can enter it after your presentation, because the Q&A box is still available for you to enter. And thanks again for your participation in the ASEAN Clean Energy Week. And we are really looking forward to see you in person, maybe next year in the Philippines. You know, we're in Bangkok. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right, bye-bye. So the development of floating solar has always been the most discussed topic in the ASEAN region for years, and therefore we're so honored to have Mr. Salman Barre in the next keynote speech, the latest floating solar landscape in Indonesia. Mr. Salman Barre is currently the country director of Indonesia from Aqua Power, and he has successfully led teams to organize, structure, and develop energy projects in various roles, ranging from being an investor, government facilitator, advisor, and energy consumer. Hi, Salman. Could you please turn on your camera and also start your presentation?
Yeah, thank you very much, Holm. Can you see me and hear me properly?
Yeah, we can see you and hear you. Wow.
Thank you so much. Just let me just share my slides. 1 second. All right, Holm, can you see the slide?
Yeah, we can see this slide and it's in full display right now. So please continue.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Salman Barre. As Holm introduced, I'm the country director for Indonesia and working for Aqua Power. So I will be talking about mainly floating solar opportunity in Indonesia. And before we start, I just want to introduce my company first. So Aqua Power is a global power and water desalination company. We've been up in business for the last 16, 17 years. We have around 38 gigawatt of power plants, out of which around 22% is renewable energy. We opened office in Indonesia almost 2 years ago. Indonesia is our 13th country to enter. And we are looking at multiple opportunities, especially in renewable energy in Indonesia. What I want to start with is just to share our experience of what we saw in the Middle East and partly in Africa in terms of the solar revolution and how countries and governments are moving towards solar power, in those regions. And the reason why I want to share this experience is because this is exactly what we see happening in Southeast Asia. So just to share one example with you, which is about Dubai. The first tender for solar PV was in 2015 for a 200 megawatt project. Aqua Power won that bid with a 5.85 cents tariff. And at that time, the market was around 7 cents, 8 cents. And what this did was when the respective Middle Eastern governments realized that solar is becoming cheaper and competitive, they started, all of the countries started doing new solar projects and new tenders. So Jordan, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, all of them went in this direction. As a result, you see in 2019, last year, when the phase 5 of this Dubai solar park tender happened for a 900 megawatt, the tariff that Aqua Power won with was 1.69 cents. So we saw a 70% drop in solar PV tariffs over a period of 4 to 5 years. And that trend is continuing, and we see more and more projects coming in all over Middle East. At the same time, last year, just to share, there was a tender in Ethiopia where we won the tender with a 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour tariff. And again, this has opened the eyes of the government in Africa to basically implement more and more renewable energy and solar plants. The same thing, as I mentioned, we are experiencing now in Southeast Asia, and I'll talk more about it in my next slides. So first of all, what are the opportunities in Indonesia with respect to solar? The main thing to understand is that the government is really behind pushing this renewable energy agenda. They have already announced that they want to do 23% of their total portfolio of power generation should come from renewable energy by 2025. Now, that's a very aggressive decision by the government, but definitely achievable. They've also come up with a formula-based approach where they said that renewable energy we will only accept if it is commercially viable. So they've said that tariffs should be at 85% or below their current regional average generation tariff. And at the same time, we know that there's a lot of funding available, and banks are liquid enough to fund especially renewable energy projects. So from a macro perspective, everything is actually getting in place for a solar boom that we expect now in Indonesia as well. PLN, which is the utility here, and its subsidiaries have actually launched multiple tenders since last year, and we see that the interest, and in fact, in the last couple of years, there have been no tender for a thermal plant. So again, the direction of the government is very clear with respect to what they want to see in their portfolio. In terms of floating PV, specifically for Indonesia, Indonesia now has already experience of doing a couple of tenders for floating PV. This year, a project called Cirata, 145 megawatt, the PPA was signed. Also this year, there have been 2 further tenders for floating PV projects. Although the submissions have already happened, but officially the results have not been announced and the projects have not been awarded. So I cannot share, unfortunately, much more information on this. But definitely it confirms that PLN and its subsidiaries and government of Indonesia are really focused on floating PV. There is huge potential that we see in Indonesia. Already, Aqua Power has done pre-feasibility studies of more than 600 megawatt in various locations of floating PV, and it is a matter of when PLN will decide to conduct the tender. PLN basically has two options. One, they do the tender themselves, or the other option is to assign this project to one of its subsidiaries, and it goes into a partner selection process then, but still a competitive one. So we expect, this year, as I mentioned, has been really good. These two floating PV projects together, capacity was 150 megawatts. Already 300 megawatt of tenders have happened, and we expect, at least 600 megawatt more coming in the next couple of years. So we look at Indonesia and Southeast Asia. And we've seen a lot of challenges that our land PV poses. And I'm not saying that land PV is not possible. It is going to continue simultaneously. But at the same time, the floating PV is providing some solutions, which it is making it more attractive than the land PV itself. And some of the things I've written here. So for example, the biggest challenge we face in Southeast Asia as compared to, for example, Middle East or Africa, is the lower irradiation, and that results in higher tariff, etc. And of course, we know that, and you must have heard from various sessions that you've attended today, that because of cooling effect, there is an increase in energy yield for floating projects. Also, it is less prone to dust, so less cleaning required. So there are certain benefits that floating provides. The other challenge that you face in land-based PV is the land availability and the land acquisition process. And again, for a floating PV project, very limited land is required, and the reservoirs or the lakes on which you're going to install these floating projects are normally owned by either SOEs or the government itself. In Indonesia, in fact, last year, or I guess this year there already has the permit to use a reservoir for floating project has already been issued by the government. So of the lake or reservoir should be up to 5% of its total capacity. This is, again, a very proactive approach taken by the government, and making sure that the developers who are coming in don't have to worry about these kind of important permits. In terms of local content, which is a higher requirement in Indonesia, very easily inside the country. And finally, the challenge that we face is about transmission systems or curtailments or intermittency. And with floating PV, especially if you are putting it in a reservoir, you have the opportunity to bundle that power with the output coming out from the hydro plant. Plus, again, a cost reduction element where substations or even transmission lines sometimes exist, and you just have to tap into that substation instead of building a new one. So all of these things we believe are going to keep bringing the floating PV solutions, floating PV projects more and more competitive as compared to land PV. Having said that, the land PV will of course have its own place and will also continue. The 23% requirement of the government by 2025, we calculated it amounted to around 15 to 16 gigawatts of renewable energy in the next 5 years. So the potential is huge in Indonesia, and out of these 15, 6 thermal wind plants, but we really believe that solar will play the biggest role in achieving this target, especially floating PV. So that's it from my side, Holem.
All right, Mr. Selman. So thank you so much for your sharing, and we think we've got some really interesting question in the Q&A box. So I'm wondering, is it possible for you to open the Q&A box and enter this question? Because it's a long question.
Oh, one question. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, I see it. So yeah, I think this question is very, very important, and I think this is asking, the person who's asking is asking about a lot of things, including natural disasters and typhoons and tsunamis and submarine life. So my personal view is that let me take one by one. If you talk about typhoons and tsunamis, I agree. You have to be very careful in how you design these projects. As the speaker already pointed out earlier, Philippines is one of the trickiest place to do these projects because of the frequent typhoons and high wind. So I think the best way is to go and do a pilot project like Sunasia is doing. But this is not a common problem across all countries. So for example, in Indonesia, where we see we are starting with reservoirs only, so not natural lakes, but reservoirs which are man-made reservoirs, and somewhat the water flow is also controlled because there is a hydro plant installed in that reservoir. So the issue of wave height is not such a big issue. At the same time, the wind, of course, you have to design your plant based on what kind of wind you expect in that area. As far as submarine life is concerned, I agree with you. We need to do a thorough EIA study and make sure that these submarine life are not affected. The second question I see is about so increase in energy yield. It's a very technical question, to be honest. I think it depends on the site, frankly, and how much higher tilt you want to go with. At the same time, as you know, there is the impact of water, the cooling effect, which is also very site specific and has to be calculated as well. So I without a site in mind, I cannot give you a specific answer, but yes, all of these things have to be taken into account.
All right, so Mr. Selman, thank you so much for your kind and detailed answers, and also very much appreciated your, really phenomenal speech.
I just see one last question. In fact, there is some research done by Asian Development Bank. And World Bank has been following this, in fact, promoting this technology for some time. There's some couple of interesting reports from them as well. So yeah, I think those are the two that I would recommend.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Selman, I think this is pretty much all about your session. And thanks again for your participation in the Asset Financial Week.
Thank you very much.
And thanks again. Now let's move on to the final stop of the Singapore session. And in this session, we will comprehensively talk about Singapore's impressive and the largest solar farm. And we're so honored to have Ms. Jan Tan in this chapter on behalf of Sembcorp to help us unveil more details of this project. Ms. Jan Tan is an experienced solar industry leader with a demonstrated history of working in renewable industries. And so, Ms. Jan Tan, could you please start your presentation right now? Hello, Ms. Tan.
Yes. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, your screen has been shown right now.
Okay. Yeah, a very good afternoon to everyone. So today I'm going to present on Sembcorp's little introduction about Sembcorp and how we are doing at the 60 megawatt peak Tengah Reservoir. So Sembcorp is a focused energy and
sorry, Ms. Tan, I'm sorry, really sorry to interrupt you, but actually I think you should adjust the presentation mode, because from our side it's actually from presenter mode, so you have to change it.
how do I change it?
Please find on top of your screen there's one option called display settings.
Like this, is it okay?
think the second one, the first one works well.
This is fine, Ms. Yan.
This is fine?
Yep, this is fine right now.
Okay, so Sembcorp is a focus and energy and urban company. So we are actually operating in 12 countries. We have more than 4,500 employees. We are listed in the Singapore Main Board Exchange. We are owned by Temasek Holdings, the government-linked company, and we are about 2.4 billion market capitalization. So what do we actually do? We actually focus on value and growth. So we actually manage a high efficiency portfolio of diversified fuel mix. We have gas. Coal is our existing assets. We have stopped investing in coal, but we are focusing a lot more on renewables and energy from waste. So as of today, as I speak, we have more than 2,800 megawatts of renewable capacity, mainly in India, in China, and in Singapore. And we are looking to growing that even more. So back to Singapore, we are actually one of the leading solar players in Singapore. We have got a couple of large projects that we have secured and completed construction over the last 2 years. Actually, if you can see, SIA, Singapore Airlines, is going to have about 8 megawatts of solar. We have some large logistics companies that has got 6 or 8 megawatt, close to 8 megawatt. A lot of our housing blocks, this is public housing. On the rooftop, there is close to 1,000 blocks that Sembcorp is currently building for solar. And we also do supply of solar power to offices like UBS and so on. So we are currently powering up about 1,500 buildings and that's going to complete in Q4 2020. But what's next? Singapore is a very small country with only rooftops and no barren land. So utility ground mount solar is almost very difficult, although we are trying to use some spare land to build solar. But I think we need to look beyond that if we are going to hit our 3 gigawatt target by 2030. So how do we actually look towards having more solar for our country? A wind in Singapore is almost impossible because it's really not windy here, it's humid. So wind is out, and renewable energy is really on solar. So of course we look towards floating, right? So we partner PUB, which is our National Water Agency, and we participated in this bid and we won the bid for a 60 megawatt project, and it's currently under construction as we speak, and we are hoping to turn on by mid of 2021. So it's a 25-year power purchase agreement. We're expecting to see about 146,000 panels on food grade corrosion resistant floats, because this is a water reservoir, right? So the quality of the floats, the quality of the construction is extremely important. And what will the energy do? It will actually power up PUB's local waterworks, about 7% of the total energy needs. And then we are expected to reduce carbon emissions by 32 kilotons per year. So this is a huge project and it's over a huge area. So as you can see, this is how it will look like. This is how we design it to be. There is a tiny little 10 test beds on the right side at the bottom right here, and that's where PUB together with our government agencies EDB and SERIS did some testing to make sure that there is no adverse impact to the flora, fauna, water quality in that area, and before they called the tender. So the results from that test bed was actually positive, and that's why the tender was called, and we actually do a lot of data reflection on this this small little piece of test bed there. So this is how the floating solar will look after it's completed. So what's exactly floating solar? For those who are not really sure what it entails, it actually has floats and pontoons where the modules sit on. The cables are then below it, but we have anchoring and mooring to make sure that the pontoons are secured so that it doesn't drift away. right? Of course, there is the solar panels, there's a DC combiner box, there's inverters. Most importantly, there is a monitoring where we can view how the performance of the system is, and then the energy is then sent to the grid. So it's one of the world's largest floating solar farms outside of China. I mean, of course, as we hear, Philippines and Indonesia is also looking into it, right? So soon it will be one of the smaller ones. But I think the interesting thing is here in Singapore, like I mentioned, we have very limited and scarce land. So having a 60 megawatt peak solar farm over a reservoir is indeed considered a very large scale for Singapore. And of course, it is greening our Singapore waterworks and also helping our government to reduce the carbon intensity footprint. Okay, so what are the innovations that we are thinking of deploying at the floating solar? So we are looking at GPS tracker to make sure that if there is any drifting of the floats and it's affected, is shifted out of position, it will affect the mooring line or the cables. These GPS trackers will actually send a signal to us, and we will send men to directly look at it. We are looking at high efficiency double glass panels. Double glass panels because it's very moist and humid, right? So the panels will actually tend to last longer. And of course, the monitoring system to continuously monitor the performance of the system. Do we have any risk? That's why I saw some questions, will it affect the water quality? Is it safe? How does typhoon affect the entire system? Definitely there is risk, but we need to mitigate it. For example, safety is a major concern. I think some of you have seen the news of typhoon causing fire in the Japanese system. There are some small localized fires. Actually, that happens when cables actually comes into contact with water. So the cable management, the design, and how we run our cables is extremely important. High wind speed does cause floats to break, and then we definitely need to take care of that in the design considerations, the way we face the panels, the way we break the wind, the strength that we are thinking about. We really need to place a lot of emphasis and focus on design compliance. Design and performance, I think the biggest issue that we will face at the floating is the bird droppings. Birds somehow likes to fly near the floating and take a rest, and they like to rest on the last panel, and that actually causes a yield issue. So we really need to see how to deter the bird but not kill it, so that we make sure that we don't affect the ecosystem, but we also don't let them affect our panels performance. So that is, to me, an art. And then, of course, we need to take care of the biodiversity, the water, the quality. I think this, our clients, PUB, is extremely concerned and careful, and we are working very closely with them because, after all, it's drinking water, right? So we need to make sure that the water quality is extremely closely monitored, and we adhere to all the EIA assessments. And last but not least, the quality and the maintenance of the system to us is very important, not only for the performance of our plant, and it's also for the safety and the quality of our clients, which in this case is PUB. Well, that's all that I have to share about the Singapore floating project. Hello, am I still here? Hi.
Hello, hi, Miss Tan. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I can.
Really, really sorry because something wrong from our side. So I just like what I mentioned before, I really appreciate your presentation and detailed speech on Singapore's largest floating solar project. And also during your presentation, we received so many like interesting questions from our online audience. So could you please open the Q&A box and choose, the favorite question to answer?
The floating costs, okay, what is the percentage of floaters cost compared to the entire system? I would say maybe it's actually maybe 15%, I would say. That really depends on the design of your floaters and the quality of your floaters, right? End of the day, these floaters have to last for the next 25 years. It has got to have the food grade quality because we are very concerned about the quality of this this material in contact with our water. So I would say it's about 15% of the total cost. Yeah. Output, how much more output you get? I think this question was answered by one of the earlier speakers. We do get extra energy out of this. Actually, it's 100 kilowatt per kilowatt, 100 kilowatt hour per kilowatt peak. Typical rooftop systems in Singapore, we get a specific yield of 1,260 to 1,280, depending on shading. But in the floating test bed, we are seeing 1,325 to 1,350, depending on design and so on. So we do see a higher output because of the cooling effect at the reservoir. Countermeasure regarding the fire hazard. I'm not so sure, exactly what happened in Japan. It's based on rumors and based on hearsay, but I understand that there is the DC cables actually came into contact with water, and then there is a reaction. I think in our case, we definitely need to really be very stringent about cable management, the cable trays that we are using. How do we tie up the cables, and these things will move and move their position over time. And then we need to make sure that in our operations and maintenance regime, we actually ensure that we have a checklist to check all these things frequently. Oh, is there more question?
I think this is pretty much all about the question, Ms. Tan. So thank you so much for your answer, and thanks again for your participation in this event. Hope to get you involved in our physical event in Vietnam and Philippines next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now let's call it an end of the ASEAN Clean Energy Week. And this is pretty much all about today's session and the whole session of our Clean Energy Week. And also, this is Leader Associates' last virtual event of this dramatic and profound year when the whole entire world has been dramatically influenced by the COVID-19. And therefore, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to sincerely oppose my appreciation on all of our distinguished speakers who has done so much thought contribution on our virtual event. And also it's your valuable content and presentation that make it possible for us to still be able to bring so much knowledge and insights to the renewable energy industry. And also, I would like to sincerely express my gratitude for our thousands of audience in the virtual series during this year. We literally cannot produce over 20 amazing online events without your kind support either. And last but not the least, we Leader Associates is so excited to take this opportunity to announce two of our physical flagship events in the booming Vietnam, namely Solar Energy Future Vietnam 2021, which will be held on May 17th to 18th in Ho Chi Minh City, and our Mega Solar Expo Solar PV Show Vietnam 2021, scheduled on November 9th to November 10th in Ho Chi Minh City as well. And we really cannot wait to welcome you all and have the face-to-face communication with our old and new friends, since it's truly been a while that we are unable to make or to have the genuine, efficient, and of course, amazing business networking over the past 1 year. And we believe the spring will bring hopes and warmth to everyone in every corner of the world after the freezing season. And of course, I will leave the link of this two physical event in the chat box below. So please be sure to check our website and find more information about this two amazing event if you're asking on this burgeoning Vietnamese market. So thanks again for your watching and participation in ASEAN Financial Week. See you in Vietnam next year. Bye-bye.